Hey everyone, welcome to Alumless. It is Friday, March the 15th. Hope you're having a great day. Thank you for joining us. I lied just a little bit. It is not Friday the 15th for us. It's actually Monday the 11th. We are recording this ahead of time this week. Chris is at Rollins College in Florida. He's got Alumni weekend. Did I say that right, Chris? Alumni weekend? That's what you said.
It's actually next week, but all the planning is happening this week. So.
Yeah. And you've got Disney coming up. So you got a big week plus some family travel. So we're like, you know what? We're going to tackle this episode in advance and let you and the family and Alumni weekend do their thing. But we're grateful for those of you who are joining us live. Hope that you'll pick up the podcast edition of Alumless as well. We've got a great show today featuring our colleague, Nicole Kempton. We're going to bring her out in just a couple of minutes. If you have any questions for Chris or myself or Nicole, or just want to say hello, we will check the chat of the LinkedIn event. So if you have any questions or just want to say hello, we would be grateful to comment on those in due course. Of course, pick up the podcast edition in order to listen to the bonus section of Alumless with each of our guests, including our Friday Cheers section, where we try to comment on some other things that may not be exclusively advancement related. And of course, we would not be able to produce Alumless without our fantastic sponsoring partner, Protopia. Protopia has created a transformational AI-powered technology that matches questions from students or recent grads with alumni all over the world that are perfectly positioned to answer them. Without asking alums to be mentors and participate in programs spread over months or sign up for an app or platform, Protopia makes scaling introductions simple. Questions get submitted and Protopia's AI does all the work. Protopia can even target stakeholders like young alumni or lapsed donors and provide them with a meaningful volunteer experience. And who isn't trying to scale volunteerism? Visit protopia.co/alumless for more details and to check out the technology that schools like Duke, Denison, Florida State, and the London School of Economics are all using to make alumni networks available for their stakeholders. All right, Chris, back in the saddle. It's good to see you.
You too. Good morning.
You're in your home away from home there at Rollins. I feel like every time I shoot a text to you, I'm at the Orlando airport. You know, I'm on my way to Orlando. You've been working
this is
with
trip 11.
Of
12 with this trip in the last 5 months. So I've been here a lot.
And of course, you know, you've had the chance to get to know Rollins intimately, to say the least. You know, but we as consultants, we're always trying to get to know each of our clients, what makes them unique, what are their core values, personality traits. We use the phrase secret sauce often when we're kind of describing how to get to know each of our clients. Can you talk a little bit about how we try to do that in our work, try to get to know each of our partners uniquely?
There is a great deal of unseen work that goes on before any project. I know you do a ton of online research yourself through their websites, but all the digital platforms and looking at communications. We actually asked each client for a set of materials that they deliver to us, which has plans and reports and demographics, snapshots of their alumni population, and on and on and on. So there's dozens of pages of materials we read. The data is especially important to me, is how their alumni sort of shake out across the spectrum, you know, by class year or by decade and by region, male, female, and diversity statistics. Every way we can slice it, we look at it so we know the population. And then, you know, the other one that happens over time is exactly that time, like Rollins. I mean, I've been here so much that I know this place, and they're hiring an executive director. And when I'm talking to candidates, we're down to a final 4 candidates who will replace me. I'll be out of here. But I can talk to them, you know, with accuracy and sincerity about the DNA of this place. So it's one of the things we pride ourselves on, is that we really get to know the institution and apply our work specifically to how that institution, you know, sort of operates and where they are in their evolutionary history.
Yes, one of my favorite parts about our work is really getting to know each institution uniquely, the documentation we ask for, the website research you recommended. And it is a little different. I think, Krista, was an age where, part of the gig was actually to go to the place and spend a few days like interviewing people. And do you think we can still get, even if we're doing a lot of the work over Zoom, do you think we still get a pretty good, accurate picture of what makes each university unique?
It's harder remote, but I'll tell you, the pandemic taught us that it's certainly more efficient and cost effective, frankly. So, through the interviews that we do, I actually believe that one-on-one interviews are as just effective over Zoom as they are in person. You miss out on the in-between meeting stuff, the walking across campus, seeing the signs and talking to students, but you still, you get pretty close to the same result from a one-on-one interview, whether it's in person or remote. So I think that's a big help. We do a lot of focus group work. You and I just finished a large listening tour where we're hearing directly from alums. I mean, they're giving us feedback. In the case of the one institution we worked with, we had 149 alums speak to us and fill out a survey right online. And speaking of surveys, we do surveys, extensive, scientifically researched surveys where we're looking at attitudes, engagements, and communications, and other ways that the alums. So I think we can do it through the means we have. If we could, wave a wand and be everywhere we need to be in person, but all of us have lives and there's real costs associated with us traveling.
Right.
But I do think we make up for it in the way we've done the background work coming into any client.
Yeah, it definitely decreases the costs for our partners, right?
Yeah,
to not
100%.
have us there in person. And I feel like I've only done it this way since the pandemic, and I feel like I get to know the universities pretty well. But when you think about how we write engagement strategies, how we make recommendations, or as you think about how universities in our space are devising their own strategies, do you think we put enough time thinking about what it is that alumni, donors, families, fans, all the constituent groups really want?
I'm hoping that the answer is a definitive yes. And our clients would all say that about our work, and otherwise we're going to be in big trouble. But I think through those means we just talked about, so the interviews, listening tours, focus groups, informal and very formal scientific surveys, I think we're getting a great deal of input that allows us to make recommendations that are, I always use the word bespoke. It has to be customized to that institution. Otherwise, what we do at one place is not going to apply to the next. And it's going to depend on so many. We talked about this in our last show, actually. The factors being things like how long have they had an alumni program, and how big is the staff, and how much budget are they spending? All those things are real. And you have to think about all of those factors in when you make a recommendation and factor in, constituent input, call it, broadly speaking, constituent input.
Yeah, and I think, we'll bring Nicole out here in a sec, but one of the interesting things about our work is when you ask alumni what they want, the answer is yes. Yes, more campus events. Yes, more mentoring. Yes, more regional events. Yes, you name it, we want it. But I think, over the surveys tell us what they really want to know. They want to know about it.
Right. Exactly.
Right? Even if they can't come to it, right? They've definitely told us.
They don't need to come. They need to know that it happened, right? And
and know they were invited.
Just about every survey we've done, the alums will say we want lifelong learning or some format of that, right? And then you hold these great programs and it's crickets. But the places that do it well have figured out how to make those things work, and then making other people aware of that they were going on is the trick, I think, in this whole thing.
All right. Well, let's bring out Nicole. Yeah. She's got lots of great, not only interest in this area, but a lot of experience, and she's our colleague too. Hey, Nicole, how's it going?
Hi. Thanks for having me.
We're grateful that you're here, that you're part of the CMAC team. Nicole Kempton is a CMAC vice president and senior consultant. Nicole lives in London, or at least near London, right? Kind of in the London suburbs.
Yeah.
And she works with her alma mater part-time at Duke University, as well as doing projects with us, the CMAC team, and is really our tour de force over in Europe. And at this moment, I think you're on vacation in Copenhagen. Did I hear you say that, in Denmark?
Yeah. Well, I'm digital nomading this week, so I am working, but I'm working from a different place. So
it's one of the beautiful things about the world we live in now is the digital nomading thing is an awesome opportunity particularly for folks in the type of work that we do. But yeah, Nicole, Go ahead.
No, I was going to say I'm not the only one who had the same idea, because there's a coffee shop downstairs in my hotel and it's absolutely full of laptops and people typing away. So I'm in good company.
I think it sounds like the right thing to be doing. Well, when we were prepping for our show, Nicole, we were talking about the idea of constituent-centered engagement strategies. And I thought, we often talk about donor-centered engagement strategies, and that's a term I think that's been around a little while. We use the phrase constituent-centered a little bit less. But maybe we'll just start off. What does that mean to you? What does that mean in general?
Yeah, so constituent to me is a great term because it encompasses alums, it encompasses donors, parents, supporters, students, other colleagues. And so it can really just mean the people that you're serving versus that I like the term donor-centric too, but in our work, especially as we're trying to go towards more of an integrated advancement model, I think constituent-centered is a little bit more inclusive and also allows us to think about different audiences for different purposes. And so what I mean when I say constituent-centered is just being relentlessly focused on the constituent in everything that you do. And so that means designing your program around the needs of the constituent. And how do we do that? Well, we have to really understand our constituent in order to do that effectively, right? And Chris, you and Chris talked a little bit about our approach, our research approach to getting to know an institution. And I think my favorite approach to being constituent-centered is design thinking. And so most of your listeners have probably heard the term design thinking or human-centered design, as it's sometimes called. And this is a process, an approach to solving challenges and problems that puts the customer, or in our case, the constituent, at the center. And you can use this approach to design products or to design services, but it involves a 5-step process. And I'm going to run through the steps really fast because I think they're actually quite critical to understanding what this is and why it's important. And the first one is to empathize. And so this is where you conduct research to better understand your constituents. We talked about that a little bit already. The second part is defining the problem. And so you take what you learned in the discovery process and you really hone in on what are the user's pain points. And the third part of the process is ideation. And so this is where you use divergent thinking. So that means, you're getting super creative. There's no bad ideas. We generate lots of ideas to solve that problem. And then we go into the fourth step, which is prototyping. And so this is where we actually think about a potential solution to the problem. And then in the fifth part, we test it. And so we take that prototype out into the real world and we test it with our constituents. And this is a really highly iterative process. And so that means that you might cycle back through all of these steps multiple times before you actually find something that works. But what I love about it is that it's sort of where our ideas meet the real world. And so hopefully, by going through this kind of rigorous process, you end up with something in the end that's more sustainable and actually meets the constituents' needs. So,
yeah. I can think of a couple times in my career that I went through those steps in order to kind of devise a new program. And I have to admit it doesn't necessarily mean you'll be successful with it, because I still think you're taking some risks in order to try new things. But I wanted to ask you sort of your thoughts about the attributes of an organization that has really figured out what it means to be constituent-centered. What does that look like? And is the opposite approach of that like university-centered, right? I mean, sort of doing what it is that the university wants alumni to do versus the converse. I mean, the university wants alumni to engage in order to provide assistance when it comes to enrollment or retention, career outcomes, and of course philanthropy. But yeah, what does successful constituent-centered university work look like?
Yeah, so I think go to the second part first and then work my way back, like go to what not to do and then kind of work my way back to what to do. And I think because I think we make a lot of assumptions, right, about our alums, and I think we're all guilty of doing it. And we think about like, what are our priorities and how can we get our alums to do what we want them to do, right? And I guess I would say, what we're not necessarily thinking about when we do that is what do their lives actually look like, and how are we solving problems for them? How are we serving them? And, when we think about like how to incentivize people to give back, I know there's one study that I think it's the Christensen Institute that published it originally. I should have looked it up before this call, but where the biggest predictor of future engagement with the institution is whether a student had a mentoring relationship with an adult during their time on campus, right? And ideally an alum. And so, they automatically, the student who benefits from that relationship automatically tends to give back after they leave the institution. And so, so I think, you asked about attributes of organizations that have figured this out. And I think one big thing that I would say is having a learning mindset as an organization, and putting curiosity first, and really thinking about how can you as a leader create a culture of curiosity within your team. And I think on the last podcast with Cheryl Harrelson, which was terrific, you talked about when you're a leader and you're transitioning from one organization to another, and the importance of learning the culture in that place. And I think that that's not just important to do when you're new, but just something that you should be doing continuously. And I think if you can create that culture on your team, you're going to have, you're going to be like listening more to what your constituents want and what they need. And you're going to be kind of putting that mindset first when you design new programs and new initiatives. And I think what I'll say on a very personal note is that I think having that curiosity mindset has really served me well in my career, because it helps you develop empathy. And, I think that's key to kind of navigating some of the politics and territoriality that tend to crop up in the university environment. It's this highly matrixed, highly decentralized place. And, you have to sort of ask yourself, well, why is the person that I'm dealing with, why do they think this way? And how might they have come to believe this particular thing that they believe? And I think when you ask yourself why, suddenly that kind of puts you in their shoes and helps you kind of figure out, how to more effectively work together. And so, so I just think that in terms of the thing that organizations can do when they're constituent-centered, it's about thinking about the alum and what do they need and how can we help them. But it's also thinking about your campus colleagues as constituents too, and how can you meet their needs? How can you be serving them more effectively? So, yeah, I think it's all of the above.
Sorry about that. I'm going to step us back a second. People know on these podcasts that we do some prep and we do a little bit of research and background so that we know what we're talking about. And one of the stories you shared with us was about specifically two examples of design thinking. Mm-hmm. One outside the field, sort of this is the Stanford Design School students in Nepal, and then the other one more in our field. But would you mind sharing those two stories, and then I'll have a follow-up. But I think these are good examples for folks to kind of get their head around this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thanks for asking that. Cause I think, I asked if I could share one completely unrelated to Alumni.
I loved it though. I loved it. So yeah, fire away.
Because I think this illustrates really the power of design thinking to save lives. And so in 2015, students from the Stanford Design School were asked to design a better incubator for babies in Nepal. And so they were thinking, we're going to design a machine that's cheaper and, more easy to operate. And they got to Nepal on their research trip, and they got to the hospital and they saw, well, they have incubators, they're just all empty. And why are they empty? And so they realized that the issue was that a lot of parents who have premature babies, they live very far from a hospital. They're not able to actually make it to the hospital in time. So you can have the best incubator in the world, but it doesn't make a difference for those people. And so they kind of completely changed their approach, and they said, okay, actually, our constituent is parents of premature babies who live far away from hospitals. And they ended up designing this little mini sleeping bag called the Embrace that costs $25. It can be heated in a pot of boiling water, and it can obviously be distributed much more easily in the rural, more undeveloped environment than an incubation machine can. And so, that design thinking project has saved a lot of lives. And I think just really illustrates the importance of knowing your constituent and also understanding what's the right pain point that you're trying to solve, right? And then closer to home in the alumni world, I think our sponsor Protopia is a fantastic example of a company that uses design thinking all the time to solve problems for their users. And so, Protopia just, they recognize that like students really want mentoring, right? But they usually are not a huge fan of these structured mentoring programs. They tend to kind of like drop off over time. Most of the time when they say they want mentoring, they mean they want just-in-time advice to something that they're dealing with. And for alums, they really want to help. But again, this like high commitment volunteer opportunity might not be the right thing for them. And they want to be able to say yes when they have time, and they want to be able to say no when they don't. And for advancement staff, I think, we know that we need technology to create alumni and student connections at scale. But the idea of, making alums sign up for another platform and building a profile and integrating another app into your database and everything.
Authenticating with a password.
It just immediately seems like a huge headache, right? And so they've kind of smoothed over a lot of those pain points, and they use this combination of design thinking and behavioral science to keep improving the product. The product is kind of changing all the time. And so, so I just think that's a really great example of a company that's leveraging this approach in our space.
And you would know too, right? Max and the team at Protopia worked with you and the team at Duke. I think Duke was the first Protopia client. And so the next question was about, how have you worked with the team at Duke to be thinking about the important philosophy of being constituent-centered and keeping that front and center? Obviously, that work integrating Protopia was perhaps part of that work. But what are your thoughts there? How do you sort of working with Duke and helping to keep that idea front and center?
Yeah, so I think I'm biased towards Protopia because I was part of the team that brought Protopia to Duke. But I think there's a number of places where I guess it occurred to me that, we need to be thinking more about our constituents. I think, most recently I was chief of staff, but prior to leaving to travel around the world with my family. But in my previous roles, I started out at the business school, and then I moved into a role overseeing graduate and professional school engagement. And I used to hear people say things like, oh, the business school does its own thing, or, oh, like graduate alumni, PhD alumni, they're not really interested in engaging with Duke. And when I actually went out, I embarked on this huge stakeholder interview process when I started the grad and professional school engagement role. And I realized that wasn't the case at all, right? But what was true was that we were definitely not meeting the graduate alumni needs, right? And in fact, some of the communication that we were pushing out to them and some of the opportunities that we were pushing out to them actually we're turning them off of engaging with Duke. And so we had to think about, okay, like, how do we change our approach to be more one Duke and less focused exclusively on the undergrad experience. And this is something that is like an existential problem for us because the listeners may or may not know this, but the Duke alumni population now is majority grad and professional school alums. And so if we're not doing a really good job of engaging those alums, then, we have a real problem on our hands, right? And so I think, there have been a lot of cases where we've used, design thinking or a design thinking light approach to thinking about how do you engage different populations that have historically been underserved by the university.
Chris, we're bumping up against the top of the show here, but I wanted to ask you, Nicole joined our team back in December. I think that's right. Nicole, was it earlier than that? Time flies by, but
yeah, that's about. I was trying to think. It's late November,
fall, right?
December.
I would say Thanksgiving, right around.
Yeah. But I wanted to ask, how did you meet Nicole, Chris? And obviously, what was sort of your thinking when you wanted to add Nicole to the team? Just letting viewers know a little bit more about how that came to be.
In any project that we do, we get to know the client. And I've been doing work with Duke for, I think, 3 strategic plans over 6-7 years. And I saw Nicole in the grad school, the business role. I saw her move into the central role with working with all grad professionals. And then move through those ranks very quickly and then become the chief of staff of all of advancement for Dave Kennedy, the VP. And all along, it was clear that there was this smart cookie underneath all the work that was within the great group of people. That there was this really shining star person, and it was Nicole, obviously. And we got to work very closely during the pandemic on what we called then the change management team. So we were on weekly, hour-long, how do we deal with this issue discussions, and I just even got further into knowing Nicole and how smart and how her brain works and how she approaches things. So it was a no-brainer. We have the exact kinds of problems that clients need solutions to with her approach. So it was an easy ask to have her join the team. So I'm thrilled you're with us, Nicole. Thanks for.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, yeah.
I'm blushing.
Wicked smart. I always tell people.
Well, we'll pick up the conversation with Nicole and keep the conversation going in our bonus segment. But Chris, before we do that, who are we featuring in 2 weeks?
Sue Ballard, now at RPI, was formerly at Syracuse, and she's fantastic. Another great leader in the space. She's in kind of I don't know if they call it that, but it's kind of a chief of staff role, thinking about how all the parts come together. Very strategic, very much like Nicole in that way. And I'm thrilled to talk to her about it and what she did at both Syracuse and what she's doing now at RPI. It'll be fun.
She's really a leader in the landscape when thinking about organizational effectiveness and thinking about talent and thinking about retention of talent, recruitment, but also all the soft components of creating a great team that is highly functioning. And of course, being constituent-centered, you'd imagine to be a really important component of that. So, all right, well, we will say goodbye. Thank you for listening live on LinkedIn or on YouTube, wherever you've picked us up. And for those of you who are listening on the podcast version, we'll be back just after the break. So we'll see you soon.